The boy's name was Jordan, and he was only 12 years old, but whenever he picked up his violin, he seemed much older. His small fingers moved with a grace that people did not expect from a child his age. Every note that came out of his instrument carried not just sound but also feeling, joy, sadness, hope, and sometimes even dreams. Jordan had discovered music when he was very young. His mother had once taken him to a concert at a local community hall. While others clapped politely, Jordan had sat still, his eyes wide open, listening to every single note as if he understood the secret language of music. When the concert ended, he whispered to his mother, "I want to do that. I want to make music too." His mother smiled and patted his head. She promised him a violin for his next birthday, and she kept that promise. From that day forward, the violin was not just an instrument to Jordan. It became his closest companion. He carried it everywhere. He practiced in his room, in the park, and sometimes even in the street near his home, where the sound would echo against the buildings and draw the attention of neighbors. People in the neighborhood often paused when they heard him play. Some came out of their houses, stood by their doors, and listened quietly until he finished. Others would smile, wave, and tell him he had a gift. An old lady who lived across the street once said, "Young man, when you play, my heart feels lighter." Those words stayed with Jordan. Though his music brought happiness to others, Jordan himself had his own reasons for loving it. Music made him feel calm when the world around him seemed loud and unfair. At school, he was sometimes teased for being quiet, for not playing rough games like other boys, but when he held the violin under his chin and drew the bow across the strings, none of that mattered. The music drowned out every unkind word, every lonely moment. Jordan's mother, Claire, was proud of him. She was a strong woman, always neatly dressed, always serious when it came to her work. But when it came to her son, she softened. She never missed his small performances at school. She encouraged him, told him stories about great musicians who had started with nothing but became legends. She told him, "Jordan, your music is a gift, and gifts should never be hidden." What most people didn't know was that Claire wasn't just an ordinary working mother. She was one of the most respected women in the country. She was an FBI director, leading teams of agents, handling important cases, and standing firm against crime. Her work was demanding, dangerous, and stressful, but she never let her son feel that weight. To Jordan, she was simply Mom, the one who hugged him, listened to his stories, and made sure he never gave up on his dreams. Still, Jordan sometimes wished his father were there. His father had passed away when he was very young, and though he had only a few memories of him, Jordan sometimes imagined what it would be like to play the violin for both his parents together. But his mother's strength and love filled much of that empty space, and Jordan often told himself that one day when he became a great musician, he would make her proud enough for two parents. One sunny afternoon, Jordan sat on the steps outside his home with his violin. The weather was warm, and the air smelled of freshly cut grass. He placed the violin under his chin and began to play. At first he played a cheerful tune, something light and bouncy that made children in the street stop their games to listen. Then he shifted into something slower, more emotional. His bow moved gently, drawing out sounds that felt like stories. A small crowd formed without him noticing. A couple walking their dog stopped to listen. A man leaning against his car smiled and tapped his fingers in rhythm. An elderly man closed his eyes and let the music carry him. Jordan was so lost in the melody that he didn't realize how much joy he was giving away, note by note. Inside the house, his mother peeked through the window. She watched her son with a proud smile, but she also felt a quiet worry. The world wasn't always kind to boys like Jordan. She knew it. She saw it every day in her line of work. And while she wanted him to shine, she also wanted to protect him. Sometimes when she looked at him with his violin, so innocent and hopeful, she wondered how much of that innocence the world would let him keep. Jordan ended his song with a soft, lingering note. The small group of listeners clapped and some even cheered. His cheeks turned red and he gave a shy smile. He wasn't used to attention, but in those moments it felt good. He packed his violin carefully back into its case, the same way a knight might put away his sword. That violin was his most precious thing. It wasn't the most expensive instrument, it had scratches and faded polish, but it carried all his hours of practice, all his mistakes, all his improvements. Every mark on it told a story, and to Jordan it was priceless. He often whispered to it as if it could hear him, promising that together they would reach big stages one day. He walked back inside, humming to himself. His mother asked him how it went, and he shrugged, pretending it was nothing, though inside he was glowing with happiness. She laughed softly, recognizing his shy pride. Then she sat him down for dinner, and as they ate, she asked him to play for her later in the evening. He agreed eagerly. Playing for his mother was his favorite thing, because she always listened with her heart, not just her ears. That night, as Jordan played in the living room, his mother leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She thought about all the challenges she had faced in her career, the long nights, the hard decisions, the dangerous moments, and how different her son's world was. His world was made of strings and music, of dreams and gentle hopes. She promised herself she would do everything in her power to keep that world safe, no matter what it cost her. For Jordan, life at that moment seemed simple and full of promise. He had no idea that soon, his music, his violin, and even his sense of safety would be tested in a way he never imagined. He only knew that he loved his violin, that it made him feel alive, and that tomorrow he would step outside again and share his music with the world. The next afternoon was bright and warm, the kind of day when the whole neighborhood felt alive. Children were laughing and running up and down the street. People were washing their cars, and the sweet smell of barbecues filled the air. Jordan, after finishing his homework, carefully picked up his violin case. His eyes sparkled with excitement because he wanted to practice a new tune he had been working on for a week. He stepped outside, carrying the violin with both hands as if it were the most delicate treasure in the world. He found his favorite spot near the steps of his home, sat down and opened the case. The polished wood gleamed faintly in the sunlight, even though it bore a few scratches. Jordan loved those scratches. To him, they were proof of how much he had grown with the instrument. He lifted the violin, placed it gently under his chin, and drew the bow across the strings. The sound filled the air like a gentle breeze. At first, it was a slow tune, calm and peaceful, almost like a lullaby. A few children nearby paused from their game of tag and came closer to listen. One girl whispered to her friend, "He plays so beautifully." As Jordan played, he lost himself in the rhythm. He wasn't thinking about the people watching. He wasn't thinking about anything else at all. It was just him and the violin, telling a story together without words. His music painted pictures of rivers flowing quietly, of stars twinkling in the night sky, of dreams too big to fit inside a child's heart. But as he played, a patrol car slowly rolled down the street. 2 officers sat inside. They were supposed to be keeping an eye on the area, but their attention was caught by the sight of a boy with a violin. They slowed down, exchanged a quick glance, and then pulled the car over to the curb. Jordan didn't notice at first. He was too deep in his music. The officers stepped out and walked toward him. Their heavy boots crunched on the pavement, finally breaking through the flow of his melody. Jordan stopped mid-note, startled, and looked up. "Hey, kid," one of them said, his voice sharp. "What are you doing here?" Jordan blinked in confusion. "I'm just playing my violin, sir." The other officer crossed his arms and frowned. "Out here on the street? Don't you have somewhere else to do that? You can't just sit around making noise?" "It's not noise," Jordan said softly, hugging his violin closer. "I was practicing. People like listening." By now, a few neighbors had noticed what was happening. They watched from their porches and windows, unsure of whether to step in. The first officer smirked. "Practicing? This isn't some kind of stage, kid. You're loitering. You don't belong here with that thing." Jordan's heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that. He wanted to explain, to say that this was his own neighborhood, his own street, and that he had every right to sit outside and play. But the words stuck in his throat. He felt small in front of the towering officers. The second officer pointed to the violin. "Let me see that." Jordan hesitated, gripping the instrument tightly. "Please, it's mine. My mom gave it to me." "Don't talk back," the officer snapped, stepping closer. "Hand it over." With trembling hands, Jordan slowly extended the violin, hoping that if he obeyed, the situation would calm down. The officer took it, turned it over carelessly in his hands, and gave a mocking laugh. "What's so special about this thing?" "Looks old to me," the first officer chuckled. "Yeah, it doesn't look like much. Maybe the kid just likes pretending." Jordan's eyes widened in fear. He wanted to reach out and snatch it back, but he was too scared. That violin was more than wood and strings. It was his heart, his dream, his future. Without warning, the officer held the violin out to the side. "You know what? This street doesn't need this kind of nonsense." And before Jordan could react, he dropped it hard on the pavement. The sharp sound of cracking wood filled the air. Jordan gasped. His legs went weak and he stumbled forward. "No, please!" His voice shook with pain as he stared at the broken pieces of his most treasured possession. The officer kicked one of the pieces aside casually. "There, problem solved. Go inside, kid. Don't let us catch you out here again making noise." Jordan's chest tightened. His eyes stung with tears he tried to hold back, but they came anyway. He bent down slowly, picking up the shattered pieces with trembling hands. To him, it felt as if someone had taken his dreams and crushed them into dust. The neighbors who had been watching gasped softly, horrified at what they had seen. Some shook their heads, some whispered angrily, but no one moved forward. The officers, satisfied with what they had done, walked back to their car. One of them laughed as if it was nothing important. They didn't even look back as they drove away. Jordan sat there on the steps, clutching the broken violin against his chest. His heart felt like it had split in two. He thought about all the hours he had spent practicing, all the moments when the violin had comforted him, all the times people had smiled because of his music. And now, in just a few seconds, it was gone. He wiped his eyes quickly, trying to be strong, but he couldn't stop the tears. His mother had always told him to stay brave, but right now, bravery felt impossible. The pain was too heavy. Slowly, he gathered the bow, the splintered body and the broken strings, placing them carefully back into the case as if there was still hope that he could fix it. But deep down he knew the truth. His violin would never sing again. He closed the case gently, holding it tightly against him. The street around him felt different now. The laughter of children seemed far away. The warm sunshine no longer comforted him. All he could hear was the echo of the cracking wood, over and over in his mind. When he finally stood up, his knees felt weak. He turned toward the house, walking slowly as though every step was heavier than the last. He didn't know how he would tell his mother. He didn't know how to explain the way his world had just been shattered. But one thing was certain. This moment would stay with him forever. Jordan walked into the house slowly, holding the violin case against his chest as if it could still protect the broken pieces inside. His footsteps felt heavy, and every step seemed to echo the sound of wood cracking on the pavement. He wanted to hide in his room and never come out, but he knew he couldn't. His mother was waiting for him in the kitchen, as she always did around that time. When he opened the door, she looked up with a smile. "There you are," she said warmly. "How was practice today?" Her smile faded when she saw his face. His eyes were red, his lips trembled, and he looked as though he had just walked out of a storm. She stood up immediately, her chair scraping against the floor. "Jordan, what happened?" He tried to answer, but the words got stuck. His throat felt tight. Instead, he placed the violin case gently on the table and opened it. Claire gasped. The violin lay inside in broken pieces. The bow was split, the strings tangled and snapped. The wood cracked in a way that could never be repaired. She covered her mouth with her hand, shocked, then looked at her son with wide, searching eyes. "Who did this?" she asked softly, though her voice carried a sharp edge beneath it. Jordan couldn't stop the tears now. They rolled down his cheeks as he whispered, "The police, Mom. 2 officers came. They said I shouldn't play outside. They took it from me, and then they broke it." For a moment, the room was silent. Claire stared at him, frozen in disbelief. She felt a storm rising inside her, a mix of sorrow, anger, and a protective fire that only a mother could feel. She pulled Jordan close and wrapped her arms around him. He buried his face in her shoulder, his small body shaking with sobs. She stroked his hair gently, trying to calm him. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here. I promise you, this will not be ignored." As she held him, her mind began to race. She was not just his mother. She was a leader, a woman with authority, someone used to dealing with people who thought they could misuse their power. But this time it was not about a stranger. This time it was her own child who had been hurt, his joy stolen right in front of his neighbors. Later that evening, when Jordan had finally fallen asleep with tears still drying on his cheeks, Claire sat alone in the living room. The broken violin case rested on the table in front of her. She stared at it for a long time. Every crack in the wood felt like a wound in her own heart. She thought back to the day she had first given him that violin, how his eyes had lit up, how he had promised to take care of it, how he had practiced every day since. Music had been his safe place, and now that safe place had been attacked. She clenched her fists. They think they can do this and walk away, she whispered to herself. They don't know who they hurt. Claire was known for her calm nature at work, but tonight her calmness was mixed with determination. She would not let her son's pain go unanswered, not because of pride, but because she believed in justice. She had dedicated her entire career to it, and now it was personal. The next morning, she prepared Jordan's breakfast quietly. He came into the kitchen slowly, his shoulders slumped. He sat down and barely touched his food. Normally, he would hum a tune or talk about school, but today he was silent. His silence spoke louder than any words. She reached across the table and touched his hand. "Jordan," she said softly, "listen to me. What happened yesterday was wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. Don't ever believe that you did. Your music is beautiful, and nothing can change that." He looked up at her with sad eyes. "But my violin? It's gone," she nodded. "Yes, it's gone. But your gift isn't. No one can take that away from you." She paused and then added firmly, "And those men will answer for what they did, I promise you." For the rest of the day, Claire balanced her usual duties at work with a hidden fire burning inside her. At the office, she reviewed reports, signed documents, and attended meetings as always, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the image of her son holding the broken violin. By evening, she had already made a few quiet calls. She asked for reports of patrols in her neighborhood. She checked the logs of which officers had been on duty, and she spoke to a few trusted colleagues. Piece by piece, she began to build the picture of what had happened. Meanwhile, Jordan stayed home, avoiding the steps where he usually played. He sat by his window, staring outside, his hands itching to hold a violin again. His fingers moved unconsciously as if they still wanted to play, but there was no instrument to answer them. Neighbors stopped by during the day. The old lady across the street came over with a basket of cookies. She patted Jordan's hand and said, "We saw what happened. It was wrong. Don't let it take away your music." A young man who often heard him play also stopped by. "Keep your head up, kid," he said kindly. "One day you'll play on a stage so big those officers will never be able to touch you." The support warmed Jordan's heart a little, but the pain was still strong. He couldn't stop hearing the crack of wood in his mind. That sound haunted him. That night, Claire tucked him into bed and stayed by his side until he fell asleep. Then she returned to her desk where files and notes were spread out. She had now identified the 2 officers who had been on patrol at that time. Their names were written clearly on her notepad. She leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Tomorrow." Her plan was not fueled by anger alone, it was fueled by justice. She knew that as a mother she had to protect her son, and as a leader she had to ensure that no child, no family, would ever face something like this again. In her heart, she promised Jordan something she did not say out loud. Not only would she hold those men accountable, but she would also show him that no matter how dark things seemed, the truth and the light would always win. As the clock ticked past midnight, the broken violin case still sat on the table, but now alongside it there was something else. Claire's unshakable determination. Jordan had lost his instrument, but he had not lost his mother's strength. And in the days to come, that strength would change everything. The next morning, Jordan's mother, Claire, woke up early. The sunlight was streaming through the blinds, but she barely noticed it. Her mind was focused on one thing, justice for her son. She prepared her day as usual, but every step she took carried the weight of what had happened. The broken violin, the pain on Jordan's face, and the injustice of the officer's actions all fueled her determination. At the same time, the 2 officers who had broken the violin started their day like nothing had happened. They joked with each other about the kid with the funny little violin and laughed, thinking they had avoided any consequences. They had no idea who Jordan's mother was or what was coming for them. Claire quietly made a few more calls. She contacted trusted colleagues and reviewed the incident reports. Everything was meticulously prepared. Witness statements, neighborhood surveillance footage, and accounts from neighbors who had seen the entire event. She didn't want to act impulsively. She wanted the officers to understand the gravity of their actions. Later that morning, she sent an official notice requesting the 2 officers to report to headquarters. The message was brief, professional, and firm. The officers read it and exchanged surprised glances. "Looks like we're in trouble," one said nervously, though he tried to hide it with a smirk. They had no idea who would be waiting for them. By midday, the officers arrived at headquarters. The building felt imposing to them. They walked down long, quiet corridors, their footsteps echoing in the empty hall. When they reached the conference room, they were surprised to find the lights on and a single chair at the head of the table. Claire was already there. She looked calm, but there was a fire in her eyes that immediately made the officers uneasy. "Sit down," she said, her voice steady. The officers hesitated but obeyed. They could feel the weight of authority radiating from her. Claire took a deep breath and placed a folder on the table. She opened it slowly, revealing pictures from the neighborhood, security footage screenshots, and written statements from witnesses. "Do you know why you are here?" she asked. Her tone was calm but carried a quiet intensity. The first officer shuffled uncomfortably. We were just doing our job, ma'am," he said. "Doing your job?" Claire's voice sharpened. "Let's be clear. You were not protecting anyone. You were abusing your power. You were cruel and you broke a child's instrument, an instrument that belonged to my son. And you did this in front of witnesses." The officers stared at her in shock. One of them laughed nervously, trying to lighten the tension. "Ma'am, it was just a violin. It's not a big deal." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Not a big deal? You have no idea what that violin meant. It was not just wood and strings. It was years of practice, dreams, and hope. You took that away from a 12-year-old boy, and what you did is unacceptable." She picked up one of the witness statements and read it aloud. Every word described their actions in detail. The mocking, the taking of the violin, the smashing of it. The officers tried to interrupt, but Claire didn't allow it. She continued, presenting all the evidence she had gathered meticulously over the past day. "You see these photographs?" she said, pointing to still frames from the security cameras. "These show you walking up to the boy, taking his violin and breaking it. This is not opinion. This is fact. You cannot deny what you did." The officers shifted in their seats. Their faces showed fear now, the arrogance that had guided their actions replaced by a sudden understanding that they were facing serious consequences. Claire leaned back slightly, maintaining her calm demeanor. "I am a mother and I am a professional. I am furious for both reasons. My son has been hurt, but the law has also been broken. You will be held accountable." The first officer swallowed hard. We didn't know it was your son." "We didn't. We weren't thinking." Claire's expression softened for a brief moment. "Whether you knew or not does not change what you did. Ignorance is not an excuse when harm is caused," she continued, explaining the disciplinary process, the possible outcomes, and the steps that would be taken to ensure that such abuse of power would never happen again. The officers listened, their earlier confidence completely gone. They realized that their careless behavior had consequences far beyond what they had imagined. After laying out the facts, Claire paused. She wanted them to understand not just the rules they had broken, but the human impact of their actions. "This boy," she said, her voice steady, "is innocent. He had a dream, a passion. You destroyed a part of that yesterday. That is what accountability is for. Not punishment for punishment's sake, but to ensure justice and to protect the vulnerable." The room was silent, except for the ticking of the clock. The officers could feel the weight of her words. They had mocked a child, destroyed his violin, and now they were facing someone who had the power to make sure they never repeated such behavior again. After what felt like an eternity, Claire stood. She looked at them with a final, unwavering gaze. "You will reflect on your actions. You will apologize, and you will learn from this. My son deserves justice, but I hope you also learn respect, empathy, and responsibility. Never forget that." The officers nodded slowly, speechless. They were not used to being confronted in this way, and certainly not by someone as commanding and meticulous as Claire. For the first time, they realized that actions have consequences, and that hurting someone, especially a child, would never be overlooked. As they left the room, Claire watched them go. She felt a quiet satisfaction. Justice was not about anger or revenge. It was about making things right. She knew that Jordan's pain could never be fully erased, but she also knew that standing up for him and holding those responsible accountable was a lesson in courage and fairness. When she returned home, she found Jordan in the living room, staring at the empty space where his violin used to sit. She knelt beside him and took his hand. "Jordan," she said gently, "what happened yesterday was not fair. But you need to know something. You are stronger than any broken violin. And tomorrow we will make sure your music plays again." Jordan looked at her, a small spark of hope in his eyes. For the first time in the past 2 days, he felt a little lighter. He realized that even though the violin had been broken, the love and support around him remained strong. His mother had stood for him, and that made him feel protected and valued. That night, Jordan lay in bed thinking about the events of the day. The fear and sorrow from the previous afternoon were slowly replaced by something new, a feeling of safety, of justice, and of hope. He understood that sometimes the world could be cruel, but that did not mean his dreams had to end. Claire, meanwhile, stayed up late, making sure that everything was in order. She reviewed the reports one last time and double-checked that the proper procedures were being followed. She didn't want her son to just have justice in theory. She wanted it to be real and lasting. By the time she finally went to bed, she felt a sense of quiet accomplishment. The officers had been confronted, their actions acknowledged, and the process of accountability was in motion. Jordan had seen that his mother would protect him no matter what, and in that moment, she hoped he also saw that courage and fairness could prevail, even in difficult times. The broken violin still sat on the table, but it no longer symbolized only loss. It had become a reminder of resilience, love, and the importance of standing up for what is right. Jordan's journey was far from over, but he had learned a vital lesson. Even in the face of injustice, there were people who would fight for him, who would ensure that his voice and his music could continue. The following morning, Jordan woke up with a mixture of nervousness and curiosity. The broken violin still lay on the table, a reminder of the events that had shaken him so deeply. Yet there was something different in the air. The tension that had clouded the house for days seemed lighter now. Jordan felt a quiet hope, though he wasn't sure why. Claire had already begun her day early, preparing breakfast and reviewing the latest updates on the disciplinary process against the officers. She had made it clear at work that accountability would be ensured. The officers had been officially reprimanded and ordered to undergo training in ethics, empathy, and professional conduct. While this wouldn't restore Jordan's violin, it was an important step in showing that justice was real and fairness mattered. Jordan sat at the kitchen table, picking at his toast. His mother watched him silently for a moment before speaking. "Jordan, I know the past few days have been hard," she said gently. "But I want you to know something important. Your music is stronger than any obstacle. A violin may break, but your spirit, your passion, and your talent cannot." Jordan looked up at her. His eyes still held a shadow of sadness, but her words made them shine with a faint light of hope. "Do you really think I can play again?" he asked softly. "I know you can," Claire replied, smiling. "And today we're going to make sure you can." Later that afternoon, Jordan and his mother went to a music store. Claire had already arranged for a new violin, one that was carefully selected to match Jordan's skill level and to inspire him to continue. The shop owner handed the instrument to Jordan gently. When he held it, he felt a surge of joy he hadn't experienced in days. The violin gleamed under the shop lights, and for a moment, Jordan forgot the pain of the broken one. As he cradled the new violin, he thought about the events of the past week. The fear, the heartbreak, and the injustice had all been intense, but he realized something important. He wasn't alone. He had his mother's love and protection, the support of neighbors who cared, and his own inner strength. The broken violin had been a test of resilience, and now he had the chance to rise above it. When they returned home, Jordan went straight to his favorite spot near the steps outside. He unpacked the violin carefully, feeling its smooth wood under his fingers. He adjusted the strings, took a deep breath, and placed it under his chin. The bow met the strings, and a beautiful, clear note rang out, carrying over the street. Neighbors who had seen the previous incident stopped to listen. A few children came closer, curious and excited. One of the men who had often waved at Jordan smiled and said, "Looks like the music is back." Jordan's cheeks flushed with happiness. He began to play a tune he had been practicing before the violin was broken, a melody full of life, hope, and determination. As the music flowed, Jordan felt something he hadn't felt in days: freedom. The notes danced in the air, telling a story of courage and resilience. The street seemed brighter, the sunlight warmer, and even the smallest breeze felt like it was carrying encouragement. Jordan realized that no matter what others did, nothing could take away the gift he carried inside him. Later that evening, Claire sat on the porch with him, listening as he played. She could see the transformation in his expression. The sadness was gone, replaced by focus and joy. She knew that this moment was not just about a violin or a melody. It was about teaching Jordan an invaluable life lesson. "You see, Jordan," she said softly as he finished his song, "life will sometimes throw unfair things at you. People may not always be kind and mistakes will happen. But what matters is how you respond. You can let the pain stop you, or you can let it make you stronger. Today you chose to be stronger." Jordan smiled, feeling a new sense of confidence. "I won't let anyone stop me from playing, Mom," he said firmly. "Good," she replied, her voice full of pride. "And I will always be here to support you. Always." News of the incident had quietly spread through the neighborhood, but Claire made sure it stayed respectful and factual. The officers had been held accountable, and the community now saw that even when someone in authority makes a mistake, fairness can prevail. Jordan's story became a quiet inspiration for those who knew him, proof that courage, persistence, and love could overcome adversity. Days turned into weeks, and Jordan continued to practice diligently. His skills grew stronger and his confidence returned. The broken violin was never forgotten, but it no longer symbolized loss. Instead, it reminded him of resilience, the importance of standing up for himself, and the unwavering support of his mother. One afternoon, a small gathering formed near his house. Neighbors, friends, and even some children from school came to hear him play. Jordan took his place, lifted his new violin, and began a melody full of life and energy. The music flowed freely, touching the hearts of everyone who listened. People clapped, smiled, and some even teared up, feeling the emotion behind each note. Claire watched from the porch, a quiet smile on her face. She had always known her son was talented, but seeing him rise above such a difficult moment made her even prouder. His strength, patience, and courage were a lesson not just for her, but for the entire community. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Jordan carefully packed his violin into its case. He felt a deep sense of peace. The world was still full of challenges, he knew, but he also understood something very important. No matter what happened, he could face it, he could grow, and he could shine. Claire came and sat beside him, putting her arm around his shoulders. "You've learned something important," she said softly. "Sometimes the world may seem unfair, but you always have the power to rise above it. Your music, your heart, and your courage are stronger than anything anyone can take from you." Jordan nodded. "I understand, Mom, and I won't ever stop playing." From that day forward, Jordan's violin was no longer just an instrument, it became a symbol of hope, resilience, and the love of a mother who would fight for him no matter what. Every note he played carried not just music but the story of overcoming pain, of finding courage in the face of injustice, and of believing that fairness and love could triumph in the end. The officers who had broken his violin had learned their lesson, but more importantly, Jordan had learned a life lesson. He realized that even when bad things happen, there are people who care, people who fight for what is right, and strength within himself that could never be broken. And so, with each new day, Jordan played his music proudly. Each melody was a reminder that dreams could survive, hope could flourish, and justice, when guided by love and courage, could always prevail. The music of his violin became not just sound but a story of resilience, love, and the power of standing strong, no matter what.